Hello and welcome to this special edition on a very, very important topic which is on everybody's mind right now, which is China and its incursions on our border. We have with us a very special guest today, Lieutenant General Jatinder Singh Bajwa. He's the editor of Indian Defence Review and the former Chief of Staff, Eastern Command and Director General Infantry. He's the author of 2 books on the People's Liberation Army, and his PhD thesis was on strategic imperatives of China's comprehensive growth, impact on India's security. His interest in the India-China border was initiated when he was posted to the Scouts in Uttar Pradesh, now Uttaranchal. He was responsible for dealing with the India-China border from Ladakh to Arunachal Pradesh at the Military Operations Directorate, and was the military representative in the experts group dealing with the delineation of the line of actual control. Under the Army's Perspective Planning Directorate, he was assigned to evaluate the threat that the PLA's military capability and potential pose to India. Thank you so very much, General, for joining us. I really appreciate your taking time out for this and look forward to a really interesting, fruitful discussion. General, let me start with a very, question that it's on everybody's mind right now. But we've been hearing about Chinese intrusions on a regular basis for a while. But usually they were resolved without much bloodshed as per the guidelines agreed upon by both sides. What went wrong this time, leading to the death of 20 of our braves, and what really happened on the ground as per your knowledge?
Firstly, thank you very much, Ram, for inviting me to discuss with you an issue which is becoming a very contentious topic in the relations between India and China. Now, before I start explaining what went wrong here, there are a number of, varied terms being used for what is happening in Galwan. There are terms like intrusion, which if you see the dictionary, it actually means going to a place when you're not expected to be there. Ingress, it's an act of entering something. There is some authors have also used the word transgress, or rather trespass. Now, trespass is not very appropriate here. Some have used capture, which is absolutely inappropriate for the action that the Chinese have taken here. And what I feel is the most appropriate and which is being used, has been used by the Army and the Ministry of Defence for very long, is the word transgress. Now, transgression here is a very simple thing. It means an act or a process of breaking law or a moral rule. And that's what the Chinese have done. They have actually broken a moral rule, which is there, which they have endorsed. And both sides have agreed that we will not use firearms. But they have gone about going to a line, going to wherever they have gone. And in a premeditated way, they had prepared for an eventuality of this sort, where there would be a scuffle. So they had prepared improvised killing tools. Now, if you don't kill with a bullet, but if you kill with anything else, it's still killing a soldier. So this action, in fact, the precursor to what happened in Galwan was evidenced in Pagangso. In Pagangso on May 5th, when they first carried out actions, and it was very surprising to me when the news TV channels were talking of soldiers badly injured and they had to be evacuated all the way to Leh. That was something which was never done, and we never expected them to be coming up with some tools of that sort. And they carried this forward to Galwan. What was our mistake was that we never expected them to be doing this. And we never thought there was any breach of trust as per the letter and spirit of the treaties and agreements, which they did. So our innocence and naivety in expecting them to adhere to these principles and agreements and moral codes was breached by what the Chinese did there. And that is where it is not the same as what has been happening earlier.
Could you sort of, Galwan and that other lake where you earlier had a clash, I mean, could you just tell us strategically what that means?
For a clearer understanding, it is essential that there must be knowledge, at least a background knowledge of the entire process of the dispute. In my view, the Chinese invaded and annexed Tibet in 1950. There was no dispute of any sort between India and Tibet. It was a custom, a boundary which was accepted by custom and tradition. So there was never any acrimonious actions, or there was no war to settle a border there. And sure, it was not demarcated or even delineated anywhere. But it was an accepted border. It was only when the Chinese came in, then they started finding disputes about it. In fact, in way back in 1954, India had raised these objections to certain maps in the public domain, which was showing an alignment unilaterally. And the government had taken up this matter, saying that the alignments are incorrect. And Mr. Chawanlai had then said that they have not seen those maps and they will examine them. Okay. So they must have examined them, but in 1959, after a lot of persuasion from India's side through their white papers, the Chinese then came up with in November 1959. Chawanlai sent a letter to the Prime Minister here that there is a boundary dispute and that there exists a line of actual control. Now, what this line was not identified or even stated anywhere clearly. And when he said this line of actual control, it was not a military line. It was a line which pertained to the administrative and jurisdictional control of the countries, whether it was Tibet or India, of where these extended. And then it was followed by, in 1960, by the officials. In April, May 1960, the officials met because both the Prime Minister decided that let's get the whole thing clarified. So both sides put up a huge pile of evidence of their own, stating their own case. And but the talks failed. They were not able to come to any conclusion which is acceptable to both sides. And this then led to the war. The war in '62 was basically a dispute on the alignment of the McMahon line. And in the western sector in Ladakh, it was a line which the Chinese had projected as their international boundary in 1960. They wanted that to be the line of actual control. In '62, after the war, they had reached that line, but they withdrew from there.
Okay.
So, after the war, then we had this discussion on, there were no diplomatic relations up to 1976. 1976, diplomatic relations were re-established, and it was felt that both the countries could progress and proceed with, some methodology to resolve the dispute. So 1981 onwards, there were border talks. Then Mr. Rajiv Gandhi visited China in '88. Thereafter, there were joint working groups which were formed with expert group built in. This carried on up to 2005 when there was no headway. The only little success was to exchange the perceived alignments of both the countries of the LAC in the middle sector. And then after that, there have been 22 rounds of talks by the special representatives, and there's been no headway. So, the Chinese feel that, both the countries are putting up evidences, historical evidences, which are very, very different. And it's not going to be resolved through dialogue. They are trying to force their way through, it seems. There are a lot of the Chinese writers who are stating this, that the only way to consolidate the LAC, their perception, is to put it down on ground, go there on ground and sit there. And, unfortunately, of the other, particularly in Arunachal, particularly in Ladakh.
Okay.
So, willy-nilly, what we are doing is our troops and the soldiers on ground and the forces on ground have been told what is their line of actual control, India's line of actual control. And there should be no ambiguity in their minds of what they are supposed to defend.
Right.
Similarly, the Chinese they've only been told about what their line is.
Right.
And both of are, continue to maintain that their line is the actual line.
Okay.
So these clashes are going to happen.
Yes, but
but they were always resolved through dialogue. This time they went a little. They went beyond that.
I'll come back to that in a little while. But let me before that ask you a sort of a two-pronged question. One is that according to your sort of understanding, what actually happened on the ground there, and B, given that there are so many conflicting sort of things, as you mentioned earlier, conflicting reports coming in from our own so-called analysts and experts, as well as the psyops coming out of China, who can, as a common man, who should I believe?
Well, firstly, whatever is being dished out on the national television by the news channels, one needs to take it with a pinch of salt, because that area is not connected to the rest of the country through any other line except the secure lines which the army has laid. So there is no way that anybody can send videos or photographs or commentaries or make statements that can come across to the rest of the world. So it is more of conjecture. And one of the things which I feel is that the TV channels are showing and putting in one corner that this is a representational video. And then they are showing some scuffles and pushing. And so it's a very wrong impression they are conveying about the facts on ground and the terrain itself. These pertain to some other areas and some other in some other time. So it is giving the viewer forgets that it's a representational video, and he starts believing that this is what is actually happening.
Right.
So we should be very careful in what we are saying, and we are the veterans coming on screens, and the experts and elements from think tanks. Whatever they are saying is speculation, and their expected point of view it is not the reality on ground, because there is no government or military point of view which has been put out from these sources. However, if there are some official who are leaking out information in Delhi, that I cannot comment on, but that would be very sad commentary if that is what is happening.
But sir, according to your own understanding, what actually led to the events of this particular thing in Galwan? What actually happened on the ground? What led to the loss of 20 of our braves?
Very, very interestingly, I was just watching. I was reading an article by a Chinese in one of their, in some news report, war on the rocks or something. Now this gentleman says that the Chinese follow 3 no's in this context. No Indian post, no clarification of the line of actual control, and no hurry. First time I came across these 3 no's, and this is probably what they're actually doing.
Okay.
And the Chinese crossed our perception of the LAC, and we brought it out to them.
Right.
And like at in normal circumstances, the confidence building measures, the treaty in 1996 has laid down a number of measures that will be adopted on ground to ensure that there is no escalation. There is a hotline which is being laid at, and here in Eastern Ladakh, it is in Spangur. There is a hotline which has been laid from Indian side to the Chinese side. And you can call for a flag meeting. And there are those regular flag meetings held, but in an emergency, a flag meeting can be called for. So flag meeting was called in this case also. It was not resolved at the lower level, the commanding officer level, the brigade commander level, the GOC level, the division commander level. So it went up to the corps commander level, and the commander of the Western Tibet district of the Western Theatre Command, Major General, who has been coming. So these talks had, in these talks it was agreed that they will pull out. And I'm sure the general coming there would have specified that by so and so time you should pull out. And in Galwan, they did not extricate their troops on time. So the Indian forces, to ensure that they go on as has been decided in the flag meetings, that they go out, they went and stood there to ensure those are moving, they move back. And the Chinese took that as an aggression, and they they retaliated.
Okay.
And if you had noted that the spokesperson of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Western Theatre Commander, the messages that, and even the Global Times, what messages are coming out in there, it's a party line which has been pushed out to them. And they said that India crossed the line twice. Now, they have not said what line. They have not said the line of actual control of the Chinese, nor have they said it is a claim line. They just said a line. So they are as vague about what they have said as they were on the ground. So when they did pull out, and these troops went there to ensure that they pull out on time, they retaliated. And that retaliation was, it was premeditated. That's why they came armed with those clubs and spiked gadgets and tools that they had made. So it was a sad breach of faith and trust which the Chinese PLA has inflicted onto India. But India is now not going to take their word for it. I'm sure of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
But we've been hearing various reasons for this so-called aggressive posturing by the Chinese, ranging from the events in Kashmir to our refusal to join the BRI, our alignment with the Western powers like the US, Australia, Japan, and our attempts to beef up our border infrastructure. But do you think China really feels sort of, threatened or intimidated by India's rise or its so-called muscular policy that we're adopting?
Firstly, I would like to, comment on the speculation of the reason why China is carried out this action. And those who have been attributing it to the various things like our bridge that we made, the road along the Shyok River, our relations with the United States, having declared or rather abrogated Article 370 and changed the situation here, and pushing out a map of Ladakh, which includes Aksai Chin. Now, or whether it is internally that we are, the FDI rules have been changed so that the Chinese cannot, their FDI is going to be scrutinized. Now, if we as Indians are going to be allowed, or rather are going to be cowed down by China telling us not to pursue our own interests, then we've already given up. I think those who have linked this to all these reasons should give a rethink. India cannot align its own national interests to suit the Chinese.
Right.
The Chinese have their own national interests, and we have ours. We have reasons to pursue our own interests, just like the Chinese are doing theirs. If there is a conflict of interest and it is not being resolved by dialogue, then it is that doesn't mean that we start giving concessions and compromising to suit the Chinese. There's no way that we can compromise. If we do any compromise here, we have lost out in any strategic autonomy that we keep claiming to be having. There are those who very loudly go onto the rooftops and say that if we have any pact with the West, strategic autonomy is being lost. Aren't we losing strategic autonomy if we succumb here to these strong-arm tactics and pressures by China? It's ridiculous to make such an equation. And I don't see that why we need to be contouring to the Chinese where our interests lie. And there is no way that India is going to stop construction of infrastructure in these areas where it is a requirement for us. And if it feels threatened, so be it. We will measure up and then stand up to their threat.
Sir, but we've been having a lot of talks all these years that we'll put the border issue on the back burner and that we will concentrate on other things like trade and people to people and all that. After this incident, is all that sort of become redundant now? I was reading somewhere that during one of these negotiations that we had over the Galwan incident, that the Chinese were linking their sort of going back on to their original positions to our sort of stopping our infrastructure building. Have you heard something along those lines?
You see, the Chinese played a good game to put this on the back burner and said that we put this on a back burner and we'll talk of it later. There is no hurry. And let the negotiations and the relationships in the other fields continue to improve and become better. But what they did in this duration was, Deng Xiaoping had come out with this 24 character strategy, which reads like: observe calmly, secure own position, cope with affairs calmly, hide our capabilities and bide our time, and be good at maintaining a low profile and never claim leadership. That was Deng Xiaoping. What has Xi Jinping done now? He has turned this on its head. And he is aggressively pushing the Chinese agenda of under the rubric of the Chinese dream. And he's pretty happy that he's backed it with military and economic power. So what did the Chinese do when this whole thing was put on the back burner? They went about consolidating in Tibet and TAR, and they're building up infrastructure for the civilian use as well as which can be oriented to the military use. To give you examples, today in Tibet, the road network that the Chinese have completed is over 51,000 kilometers.
Mm-hmm.
There are 663 villages in Tibet which have been connected with optical fiber cable. They have, in this same duration, the railway line has been extended from Lhasa to Shigatse to the south. And Shigatse is on the north bank of the Sangpo or the Brahmaputra river. They are extending this railway line further down south to Yatung, which is at the mouth of the Chumbi Valley.
Uh-huh.
They are also having plans to go westwards 700 kilometers on the border of Nepal and eastwards along the Sangpo from Lhasa to Nigati. Now, Nigati is on the main highway from Chengdu, Nigati to Lhasa. And Nigati today has an international airport and it has a highway which is comparable to any highway which is in Europe. Okay. So, and Nigati is bang opposite the Arunachal Pradesh, just before where the Sangpo takes the bend around the big mountain, and before India. So they have done a hell of a lot in this period, and their orientation was very clear. They have also concentrated on developing military equipment which is suited for these areas. They have made a light tank, which they have already inducted into Tibet and have carried out exercises, live fire exercises with those tanks. They have moved in a lot of artillery and rocket artillery here. They have been training with their new attack Hepter and the special forces. They've been practicing how assaulting the Quinlan Range Mountains north of Tibet. They have been practicing attacking features over 5,000 meters. So this is what they have done in this period. And now when they have consolidated, they feel that they can start pushing their agenda to align the line of actual control by force rather than through dialogue, because they feel that the dialogue is not going to give them any favorable results, and they wanted everything that suits them and is favorable to them from the political and military point of view. And you see, why Ladakh is a major issue to them. Ladakh is captured Indian territory. And in 1985, Deng Xiaoping's proposal of the package deal that they do not claim, they will forego the claim of Arunachal and India should give up the claim of Aksai Chin. That is a very ridiculous proposal because both are Indian territory. China was never there in Arunachal, so why is it even talking about Arunachal? And how can India turn around and say, okay, we concede to you the whole of Aksai Chin when you actually occupied it by force? And their lifeline, the National Highway 219, which is the Western Highway coming from Kashgar to Rudok to Lhasa, they want to give depth. Aksai Chin does not have defendable features in this area. So the most formidable defense line is along the arm of the Karakoram, which comes southeast from Dibio. And that is the one which is on the east bank of Shiok.
Right.
So they are actually wanting to basically give depth to that highway and have a place from where they can defend Aksai Chin. And that is the only places along this ridge line, which is in Indian territory.
Right. So, I'm sorry to sort of interrupt you now. We sort of seem to be running out of time. But, in your view, what next? Is that treaty about not using force on the border no longer valid? I mean, now I believe there was a report that Indians have been told to use whatever force is necessary to protect our border, number one. And B, what are the other options that India has right now? I mean, without sort of going into a lot of detail, if you could briefly recount that, what are the main options that India has right
Let me just read out to you what came out in the Global Times on 2nd of June 2020. I'm just reading that to quote, China has always followed in real earnest the consensus reached between leaders of the two countries, strictly abided by signed agreements, and stayed committed to safeguard national territory and security and maintain peace and stability in the border areas. Now, this is there in the Global Times on the 2nd of
now?
June. But they have actually violated everything that what they have said here.
Mm-hmm.
So, where do we stand? Why is China wanting to continue to pursue this agenda in Ladakh? And why is it not wanting to resolve the boundary?
Right.
There are some reasons. Why does China consider India as a threat? India is no military threat to China, and India does not have any intention of going and usurping or capturing or holding and taking away any Chinese territory. So, what is the threat? I mean, I find that the Chinese continue to say, there are a lot of these writers who are talking of India as a threat, and India today, they are the Hong Kong, Taiwan, and South China Sea are diplomatic threats, but India they feel is a military threat.
Mm-hmm.
So, in what way is it a military threat that we are now focusing on trying to take back Ladakh? Well, if it comes to that, we will. But there's another reason I feel that why China is doing what they are doing and why are they dithering on a resolution of the boundary dispute. They are not very comfortable and they are apprehensive of the post His Holiness Dalai Lama's era. They feel that India will have a leverage, a big hand to play in creating whatever the Tibetans want to do in Ladakh. And how are the Tibetans going to react? No one knows.
Right.
So therefore, if they resolve this boundary dispute, they're going to be having problems of how they can pressurize and leverage India into doing things that they want India to do. So one of the reasons is that, and then what are you looking at? What are the Indians' options? As the late External Affairs Minister Sushma Swaraj had said that when the Chinese were talking too much of Arunachal Pradesh and interfering in everything in Arunachal Pradesh, she had said that Chinese also should be conscious of our sensitivities. If they want us to be talking of one China policy, they should also respect our one India policy. And India from
Right.
Kashmir to Arunachal is all ours.
Right.
So there should be there can't be two ways that you do not respect our sensitivities and we should respect and support your one China policy, and we should also be respecting your core interests and reiterate that we support this one China policy and your core interests. It cannot be one-way traffic. So
I get
there,
it. So, we
there,
are
there
really
is a
sort
problem.
of running out of time, but I wish we could continue this for a much longer period, but there is this time thing that as we explained earlier. But from my understanding, what you're saying is that India will continue to defend its borders to the best of its ability without anybody trying to infringe on it, no matter what it takes. And this is a very different India from what it was, let's say, 30, 40, 50 years ago. So on that note, I'd really like to thank you so very much, General. And, I look forward to sort of seeing you again on board this thing. And perhaps we could do a slightly more detailed thing where we could get into the nitty-gritties of what the issues are. But this time, unfortunately, we'll have to cut it short. Thank you, everyone, for watching us. That was General J.S. Bajwa telling us about what really happened on the border and what India's options were. We look forward to having you back with us again. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much. My privilege to be there here with you on this, to explain to people there are no shortcuts, and the Indian Army and Air Force and Navy are going to stand fast in protecting the integrity and the territorial integrity and the sovereignty of this country. And I have no doubts, and I'm sure the people on ground there who have given this responsibility have no doubts in how they are going to carry it out. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you. Bye.